The government shutdown, what would it mean? We really misunderstand the whole concept of a government shutdown. It does not shut down the government. We just call it that. What it does is it shuts down those activities which are governed by discretionary spending that's voted by Congress each year. The entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits, food stamps, welfare, the whole disability, all go on getting paid because they are not governed by the funds that Congress appropriates annually. It is only the discretionary spending that Congress controls, which is about a quarter of the budget, maybe about 30% of the budget that's affected. And in reality, even that isn't affected. Air traffic control will continue, the military will continue. Some employees of the government, about 800,000, would not be paid, but historically they're always then paid back pay once the government reopens. Social Security checks continue to go out, and there are a few inconveniences. The passport office, for example, is closed to new passports or renewals, but you can still travel on your existing passport. The customs officers still man the airports. The national parks would be closed. A variety of museums and stuff would be closed. It really is not the catastrophe that everybody says. But that sort of doesn't matter politically because the media will always say that it is a catastrophe. They'll cover everybody who's waiting online for something and people who've had to cancel their vacations and they're going to lose the airfare that they paid, and the media would zero in on the harm that's affecting people. But in fact, it's a relatively benign thing. Now, I believe that it's a mistake to do that because I think that it is much better if we move things to the brink where the debt limit is concerned. Because when you fight over debt, you have an inherent advantage over Obama. And Obama has a real disadvantage in begging and pleading for the right to borrow extra money. It's a little bit like a school strike, I think I said in a previous video. You may believe teachers need more money, but you would not support closing down the schools and having a teacher strike to achieve it. And that's how most people feel about shutting down the government. So I certainly applaud Ted Cruz's filibuster. It took courage and stamina, and we need that kind of thing in the Republican Party. But I believe that the better part of wisdom here is to make whatever deal you can over the continuing resolution. You're not going to get much. And then 2 weeks later, fight over the debt limit. And then come in demanding perhaps a delay of Obamacare, caps on entitlements, the Keystone Pipeline, and a whole variety of things. And there you have leverage, because the public will easily understand the idea that we're not going to increase the limit on your credit card until you cut back your spending.
The News at 11 continues with some real talk about that government shutdown we're facing. It's less than 49 hours away now, and there is no sign that lawmakers are any closer to figuring out a plan to prevent it. On the far right, they're opposed to a short-term plan to buy time. On the left, they're demanding DACA be a part of it. There's no clear path forward as of tonight.
So what does it mean, and what does it mean for you, and how did we get in this mess? So many questions. You've got them, and John Henry has answers in an evening stroll around town.
Okay, so the government may shut down midnight Friday night if Congress fails to pass a spending bill that's ultimately signed into law by the president. But complicating matters, immigration talks. Some Democrats may avert a deal on the shutdown if more is not done to protect dreamers. So let's take a walk. Good news first. If you're a D.C. resident, you shouldn't expect any major changes to service if a shutdown occurs. Mayor Muriel Bowser says operations will continue as normal. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton also got Congress to agree to a provision that essentially shields D.C.'s budget during shutdowns. Now here's the bad news. There's obviously a lot of federal workers in our region, more than 360,000, many of whom could be furloughed. After 2013 shutdown, most of those workers got their money back. However, this time around, there's no word on whether that would happen. And then there are our area's attractions. The Smithsonian says if a shutdown happens, it's closing its museums Monday. The Lincoln Memorial may close too. But the Department of Interior says war memorials and open-air parks like the National Mall will still be accessible to the public. One more thing, if you plan on participating in the Women's March event that's planned for this weekend on the Mall, organizers say no need to worry, that's still on. From the National Mall, John Henry, WUSA 9.
And John just mentioned the Women's March set for Saturday. It is worth noting the March for Life was never in jeopardy because of the potential shutdown. It is scheduled for Friday, well before the midnight deadline.
Morning, Maine's two House members are reacting after the vote in the House. Republican Congressman Bruce Poliquin voted for their measure, saying a government shutdown is simply unacceptable, adding he's urging his Senate colleagues to do the same. Democratic Congresswoman Shelley Pingree voted against the bill, saying no one wants to see a shutdown, but kicking the can down the road is no way to run the government.
Political analyst Mark Sandalo joining us now for a closer look at the potential shutdown. Good morning, Mark. Now, how would a shutdown affect Mainers?
Christina, your mail will still show up. The military will still be on duty. Social Security checks will still arrive. But if you were planning on getting a passport, if you want a gun permit, those are going to be on hold if the government shuts down. The big problem for people who work for the federal government. Now, Maine is nothing like down here in the D.C. area where almost everybody works for the federal government. There's about 15,000 civilian federal employees in Maine. When you consider Maine's size, that's actually a larger percentage of people employed by the federal government in Maine than there are in most states. Now, those people are going to be, most of them, without work until the government were to reopen. And whether they get paid or not, that's always an open question. Either they get reimbursed later, in which case taxpayers have paid for them to do nothing, or they don't get paid, which is obviously a serious hit in their income.
And Mark, we're also hearing a lot about immigration and Dreamers. Why is this at the issue of the center of the budget debate right now?
It's because the budget that Republicans are pushing and Donald Trump wants includes a lot of money for border protection, including Trump's wall between the United States and Mexico. Democrats say if they're going to vote for anything like that, they want an extension of this DACA program, which are for the children, young undocumented kids who were brought here by their parents illegally, but the kids know no other home. Now, almost everyone agrees that there's no reason to keep them in the United States, but Trump has said he's ending the program until Congress comes up with a deal. There's been no deal, and Democrats are saying enough, now's the time. By the way, California has 250,000 of these DACA recipients. Maine has many, many, many fewer. We're only talking about hundreds, but boy, for those hundreds, it's a pretty critical issue.
We'll have to see what happens. Thank you so much, Mark. That deadline again, midnight tonight.